Oosterhouse here with RealAgriculture.com. It is our Wednesday edition of RealAg Live. We have made it through the week. I always like the Wednesday editions of RealAg Live because it's kind of that for me. I'm in Alberta. It's 1 p.m. Mountain, and it is just we've halfway done it, folks. I love my job, but we're halfway through the week, so that's always good to see. I'm gonna bring in today's guest today. It is Alanna Koch. She is the board chair of the Global Institute for Food Security. How's it going today?
Really great. Good afternoon, Kara.
So, people in Saskatchewan or people around Canada who might be watching, they also recognize you for your time spent in politics. Do you want to talk about that run you had?
I guess we can start with that. Sure. Sure. Well, I was involved in government a couple of times in my life. Back in my early days of my career, I was on the political side of a government here in Saskatchewan, and then I went out to the industry for a while, and then ended up back in government on the professional public service side as the deputy minister of agriculture, and then deputy minister Premier Brad Wall. And when he retired from being premier, I took a run at the leadership of the Saskatchewan Party. It was a great experience. I liked everything, I guess, except the end name. But it was really an amazing experience. I got to meet so many people, got to travel all over Saskatchewan, talked a lot of agriculture, talked a lot of issues, and came in second. It was just 3% short of being the premier of Saskatchewan. But that was then, and this is now, and onward I go, working again in the agriculture industry. But politics has always been in my blood, and I always say it's like a chronic condition. I think I'm currently in remission, but I don't think politics is ever going to leave my blood, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So, what was it like working in government? What were some of the challenging issues or files that you dealt with when you were in government?
Well, as Deputy Minister of Agriculture, I would say the biggest issue when I first went into government was to really shift the view of government and how it interacted with the agriculture industry. I think in the former administration held by the NDP, of course, for a very long time prior to the Saskatchewan Party getting in, they had a very different view of interacting with industry. Very much a government knows best. Very much, I thought, a top-down approach, sometimes a patronizing approach, and didn't really dialogue with industry the way I thought was necessary. And having come from industry and being a farmer myself, I think that's what I saw as the biggest challenge to begin with. So we definitely shifted gears there, and the Ministry of Agriculture here in Saskatchewan really took a very different approach, as did Saskatchewan Crop Insurance. And I think now it's very connected to industry, takes a lot of guidance and advice from industry, reaches out, asks for input, and therefore is far more responsive and effective in programs and policies. Again, the biggest challenge there was making sure that government got out of the way, that farmers and industry could do what they needed to do, what they do best. And oftentimes that means government just set the right policy climate, the right tax climate, the right support programs, and then just gets the heck out of the way. So farmers and industry can do what they do best, which is to, sustainably produce crops and livestock, create prosperity, create jobs, all those things. So, and then I think the next biggest challenge in government when I was the deputy was I really saw this increase in agriculture for modern tools and technology, and kind of almost the negative attack that industry, definitely had seen for a while, but it really felt that it was really becoming more and more of a challenge, so much so that I felt that it was going to be a barrier to future growth of Saskatchewan agriculture and Canadian agriculture. So really took that on from a Saskatchewan perspective, kind of led the charge to try to get that to be a national conversation, and not just a conversation in government, but also hand in hand again with that industry government, absolutely necessary partnership. So I think this is going to be an ongoing challenge for us, Kara, in agriculture. Obviously, public trust, building it, maintaining it, making sure that we can feed the world. That's not going to go away, but I think we're in a far better place because of the progress that we were able to make during the time that I was able to be part of that conversation in government.
So right now, obviously, like you said, public trust is it's huge. It's not a conversation that I think is going anywhere anytime soon, like going away for sure. What sorts of things would you be changing right now if you were still in that at the table and having those conversations? Is what would you be doing differently than what's happening right now?
Yeah. So I get to, I guess, from the, from an industry and almost the organizations that I'm involved in, I get to still be part of some of the discussions and conversations. Obviously, not as a government decision maker, but still as very much an interested industry person. I don't consider myself, I don't think there's the opportunity for anybody to be bystanders if we're in the industry. And so, in fact, I do go out and publicly speak about public trust and, in fact, how we can do a better job in industry of communicating what we do, why we do it, connecting on our mutual interest with consumers and customers, explaining how we are responsible in taking care of our land and our livestock and etc. And so I think the things I might do different is just to ensure that there's adequate funding for organizations that are committed to this. So the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity is doing some great work. I think they're important to get data-based information so that we can drive our decisions according to what reality is based on Canadian consumers' views of agriculture and food. And then agriculture in the classroom here in Saskatchewan, we've done a great job of funding that. I'm not sure that's even across the country. So I think that's important. And then we've got a Farm and Food Care Association here in Saskatchewan. I believe it's Ontario and PEI that have the other ones. And I think this is very much a consumer connection to food and how we produce it. I think that might be a model that could be used in other parts of the country as well. And so that might be something I would do a little different, is to make sure that we've got adequate resources and adequate organizations being the voice for Canadian agriculture and connecting with consumers.
So before we get into some of the boards you sit on and some of the other things, I have to ask in politics. Obviously, COVID is something we did not see coming, and I always find it interesting to kind of ask how would someone else have dealt with it different? Is there any sort of different approach you would have taken to COVID versus what has been done?
Oh boy, I talk about a tough issue for governance, governments to be managing. For me to judge, our current governments and how they're handling it. I will say that I think our federal government, frankly, has failed us in being as prepared as they needed to be. Obviously this was a surprise for everyone, but the fact that we are, so behind in our vaccination supply and in our vaccination rollout, huge, huge problem for the country. So I think I will judge the federal government on that. I think that's lack of leadership and direction, and they have failed Canadians. I think provinces have tried to pick up the pieces, and some have, it's been uneven in how they've determined their vaccine rollout. Perhaps I might have gone a little quicker to using the pharmacy, distribution channel. We use them for, I don't know why I thought of sooner and just get that completely engaged in the supply chain in getting vaccines rolled out far more effectively and quickly. But it looks like now we are picking up that piece. So that might be something I might have done a little bit differently. As far as the lockdowns, what we are doing, what we're not allowed to do, oh man, like that is so difficult because here in Saskatchewan, we've been quite fortunate in that, yes, we've had our lockdowns and our restrictions and, all the same quarantining requirements that the rest of the country's had, but we perhaps are one of the more open provinces compared to so many others. And I really give Premier Mo credit for making those decisions. He certainly has been, publicly criticized for that by people who think that everything should be locked down all the time until there's no COVID cases at all. And I just think that's completely ridiculous. So I think Premier Mo's kind of found his way pretty well through this really challenging time. It's been uneven leadership across the country, but I do give Premier Mo credit. And he certainly would have been in better shape here in Saskatchewan if we had a better federal government.
Now, what you said, policy and politics, they've always been a part of you, and you'll never quite get rid of them. What started that for you? Have you were you a kid that was interested in it?
I grew up in a really politically active family. My mom and dad both were super interested in politics, super active. They were both involved in helping to run campaigns. They were always actively out, door knocking, selling memberships. We would have campaign events at our farmhouse when I was growing up, right from the time I was probably, I don't know, 3 years old. So I was probably door knocking since I was a kid. And then, went to university, was part of the debate club, and then immediately started working, for provincial government very early when I was in my late teens. So yeah, it's in my blood. My grandfather and grandmother were very political as well. And, it was my grandpa that actually said to me right from the time I was a teen, someday you're going to be the premier of this province. And when he was in the hospital, he was 93, and he was about to pass away. He said, "You have to promise me you'll be the premier of Saskatchewan someday." And I said, "Papa, I can't promise you that, but I promise I'll try." Not knowing if I'd ever be able to keep that promise. I did keep the promise. I gave it a good shot, gave it a try. But I just think politics, so many people, are so angry with politicians and really are very critical of politicians. And there's no question, some politicians aren't good people and aren't doing good things. But I mean, thank goodness we still have people who are willing to go into politics, who are willing to be our leaders. I mean, it's a thankless job. You can't make anybody happy. I mean, you're either doing too much or too little on whatever issue it is. So, you kind of get the government you deserve, right? So if you treat your politicians terrible, you pay them not very well, and you constantly are, now with social media attacking them daily, many times a day, holy smokes, who are we going to have left to govern this country? So that's why I think it's so important to be interested in politics. And for me, it's very policy driven, always has been. And I think that's from, cutting my teeth early, being in political positions in government and seeing the impact of good policy. And then, of course, going to Western Canadian wheat growers very early in my career as well, who, of course, are very focused on policy. And I had the great opportunity to be mentored by some amazing leaders of the Western Canadian wheat growers, which were like hardcore policy, nerds. And I mean, nerds in a good way, like just super focused on what good policy was. So I learned really early from some of the best.
That's awesome. And as you said, you grew up on a farm. Was ag always something that has been really deeply involved with you as well?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, originally a dairy and grain farm. And then, when I was in my late teens, we were involved in dairy as my dad and brother sold out of that and went straight into grain. Was always around the farm and helped, but I had never imagined that I'd be a farmer per se. Went away to the College of Agriculture, so agriculture was in my heart then and still is today. Happened to fall in love with a farm boy who was a grain farmer too, and we both have worked our entire career in ag, and kind of later in life really became farmers. And so now I'm very proud to say that I am farming, but I probably always thought agriculture was definitely going to be something I'd always be involved in. Wasn't sure I'd actually ever be able to get to farm myself, but now am. And so that's kind of like the icing on the cake because I've done so many other things in the industry. So now, and I was involved in the farm, but now it just feels more and more real because I can, put into action all the things I've talked about, and I can use real life examples of my own operation when I'm trying to illustrate a point, whether it's about public trust or policy or leadership or whatever the case might be.
Absolutely. And we have a question here from Clayton. He says, "How optimistic are you on the future of the world ag trade and Canada's place in it?" Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm always going to be a trade optimist because I just committed way too much time to promoting free trade for Canadian agriculture and food that I don't want to, throw in the towel and say there isn't opportunity there. I was super involved in going to Geneva representing Canadian ag and food when the WTO negotiations were going on. So it can be very discouraging when we see all the roadblocks and all the barriers and all the protectionism around the world. But I remain optimistic about the future of ag trade because it's really our only choice. If we think about, raising all of the populations around the world out of poverty to be beyond subsistence farming, to actually have them more food secure, to imagine how we can see those populations prosper, as well as our own, farming industry here in Canada. We have to have global trade with as few barriers as possible. It's always going to be a challenge. Agriculture and food is the most protectionist sectors we've got in the world, and it's so filled with politics. But I am optimistic that we're going to find our way through this protectionist period, and there will be brighter days ahead. And we have to have people that remain really hopeful and focused on that. I was involved in CAFTA, the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance. They still do great work. And we do have to have a strong voice for Canadian agriculture and food to make sure that we remain, focused on free trade and all that it has to offer us here in Western Canada and Canada. And there's just too much on the table for us to give that up.
So, as you said, you were involved with Western Canadian wheat growers very early on in your career. Do you want to talk a bit about what kind of drove you to join them, and why you felt that was important?
Yeah. Well, I'd been in government, as I said, in a conservative government in political positions for 8.5 years. And so when that government was booted out here in Saskatchewan, I knew there would be, a pretty long time ahead where we wouldn't be having that kind of a government back in power. So the Western Canadian wheat growers were just right then searching for a new executive. I knew them really well because I had worked with them when I was in government. And in fact, my parents were some of the original members of the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association. So, the principles really meant a lot to me, business minded, very science based, free trade, market oriented. These were things that I personally identified with. And then when I had the chance to get to know some of the people around the wheat growers, those were the kind of people that I knew I could learn from, could certainly do my best to serve them and to more broadly serve the industry. So, I mean, it was an amazing time in my career. Early days, I was so much from the people around that organization, and some early mentors really made a difference in my life. And then, watch the difference we could make at national and international tables. In my role as executive director, and then, seeing the really amazing leadership around the table with all of the board members. And, from early days, the wheat growers had quite a few women around the organization as well, which was a bit unusual at that time in my career. So there was women, around the board table, and a lot of women involved in the organization, really making a difference and really influencing. So, boy, that was an exciting organization to be part of in my career, and still I hold as some of my most my best memories, my greatest challenges, and learned so much. And these are lifelong friends that I've maintained relationships with, up until today. Got to be involved in 2 history books for the wheat growers too. Was editor of the 25th anniversary of the wheat growers, and then just edited their 50th anniversary history book called Warriors for Wheat. So pretty big privilege for me to be involved still to this day.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Do you have any advice for somebody who's just kind of starting out if they're interested in, ag policy or politics or wherever it may be, being on a board? What sort of advice would you give?
Oh boy. Well, I would say seek out the opportunities. There's always opportunity. Even on some of the commissions now that we've got in Western Canada, there's elections, every year for one or several of those commissions. That's a great way to be involved in an organization that isn't all policy, because obviously there's research and advocacy included in those, but definitely some policy as well. And you get to come into an organization that's got a little bit of history and a little bit of knowledge, and then you can learn from others and also make a big difference and really be a positive influence in the industry. So just get started. Choose something, whether it's being elected to a commission. We've got lots of organizations to be involved in. My daughter here in Saskatchewan is involved with Saskatchewan Women in Ag and Sask Young Ag Entrepreneurs. There just seems to be endless opportunity. Just walk through that door, take the opportunity. You're always going to think you're never ready. You'll never be ready enough, but you are ready. And, you're never going to have it all figured out. I still don't to this day have it all figured out. So just get started, meet great people. You'll be mentored by amazing people that will make you better. and just walk through those doors. There's always lots open for us in agriculture.
So another thing you are involved in is, as I said at the intro, you're the board chair for the Global Institute for Food Security. If somebody's not overly familiar with the company, do you want to talk a bit about what it is?
Yeah, so it was formed in 2012. It was an organization that Premier Brad Wall put together with the University of and Potash Corp of Saskatchewan, which is now Nutrien. So it was this unique public-private partnership that was focused on securing food globally. So thinking about the impact Saskatchewan has as the world's largest exporter of so many crops. So thinking about that from an actual food supply perspective for the globe, but then also thinking about it from an obligation and a responsibility perspective. So many of the innovations and discoveries that we're making here that have helped us be the world's largest exporter here in Saskatchewan, how could some of that innovation and technology assist others to become more food secure? So we think about dryland farming, some of the advances we've made in, whether it's seeding technology or in breeding technology, well, those could probably be used in some other parts of the world that also have challenges of dry land. So it was this kind of opportunity and responsibility that established the Global Institute for Food Security. And now our mission is to see a world where everyone has access to safe and nutritious food. And it's going to be done through innovation. And we work with partners, both public and private, to discover and to then develop and then deliver these technologies around the world to help us have these secure food supplies that are affordable and nutritious for the global population.
So, how do you personally define food security? I feel food security is one of those things that it's kind of like sustainability. Everyone seems to have a little bit of a different take on it. What? How do you personally define it?
Well, I define it as in, sustainably produced food that is then available affordably and that is nutritious and safe. So to me, that's what food security is. And you're right. I mean, even sustainability is defined differently, and I suppose food security is too. But I just think it is that very basic, access to safe and nutritious food that, for me, is the complete underpinning of what food security means.
And how, I guess, has your approach to food security changed during COVID? Because that all threw a loop into that as well.
Yeah, well, I think so often Canadians have probably undervalued our secure food supplies here in Canada. And it isn't saying that there aren't hungry people in Canada. We know there are. We've got our own challenges here in Canada that need to be handled. Seldom it's because of food supply. It's more because of affordability or distribution or some of the social challenges that we face here in Canada with some of our populations. But I mean, the bottom line is, I think the change that I've seen in my own view, and I'm hoping the global view, which is great opportunity for agriculture, is agriculture really has delivered. Canadian agriculture for sure has delivered, but really global agriculture has done a pretty good job of figuring out supply chains, making sure that fairly quickly we got through some of the barriers and the challenges that COVID threw in front of us, and we started feeding the global population again, fairly effectively and still affordably. Safe and nutritious food. Think about the supply chain here in Canada. We had that blip in, kind of wondering how all the transportation and logistics systems were going to work, how groceries were going to be available, how that whole distribution system was going to settle out. And yet I think we very effectively have seen with, a very, very short disruption, agriculture has delivered. And I think that's the opportunity side of agriculture. So often we're looked to as maybe a bit of a problem environmentally, and I think we've been branded, in the wrong way that way. And so it's to say we are the solution. We're the solution environmentally. We're the solution, nutritiously. We're the solution, even from an economic perspective. And, we need to be this as the solution and maybe help get the message out. And I think COVID is going to maybe help us really get that message out louder and clearer than ever before.
Yeah, I completely agree. What what sort of things now, as you've been a part of so many different boards and your time in politics, you have had a leadership position. What would you define your leadership style as? Everyone seems to have a little bit of a different leadership style or philosophy. What would you define yours as?
It's always hard to define your own leadership style because I always have to respect that it's how others see you. But what I hope that I am seen as, and what I still try to work on every day, is that I always act integrity, that I act authentically. What you see is what you get. Whether I'm at work or on my farm or in my community or with my family. So being that genuine person, and also hopefully I've become a better listener in my life. I'm not sure I was at the beginning, but I think I've gotten better because I think it's in those quiet moments that we hear the best of people and we can also get the best from people. So, I think leaders often, hopefully I've not been at the front of the parade. Hopefully I've been in the parade and helped to get the parade going in the right direction because of my ideas and the way I deal with people. And hopefully, uh, have seen me as being a great team builder. And in that, that's how they've seen me as a leader. It's, like I said, a tough thing to think about, but I try to be very honest and open and transparent. And like I said, what you see is what you get with me.
Okay, so my next question's a little double barreled. Going forward in the next couple of years, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges for agriculture, and what do you see as some of the biggest, what are you most excited for in agriculture?
Mm. Well, I do think, Kara, the biggest challenge is going to be this whole public trust file. You threw the word sustainability out, and I talked about sustainably producing safe, nutritious, affordable food. So this whole sustainability conversation, how that links to public trust. Will the public understand what we're doing? Will we effectively communicate that? Will we be able to have access to the tools and technology? This is what I'm always afraid of. What I used to say to people when I was in government: if you invite me into your house to regulate you, I will never leave. And that's the challenge is if we get governments in to regulate away from having access to tools and technology, we won't be able to feed the world. So this is, I think, our greatest challenge is public trust and how that links to really, I see that linking to everything. But the greatest opportunity is agriculture has kind of, we've become aware of this finally. We are getting better at communicating. We are getting better at engaging consumers, and we're getting better organized in the industry. And I think there's great opportunity in that. And the other thing I'm really excited about, is the innovation in technology and what that means for us. It's just never ending when I see what's coming out of, say, the work we're doing at the Global Institute for Food Security, or what I see happening in the industry, or all of the new digital ag, what that means for opportunity for us. And the last exciting thing I'll mention is young people and how they're excited about opportunities in agriculture. And we're seeing not just young people from the farm getting involved in agriculture, but in fact, people from urban Canada getting involved in agriculture because they see it as exciting, making a difference, feeding the world, you know, accessing innovation in an exciting career way. And so this is pretty cool, seeing so many young people being interested in agriculture as a future career opportunity.
And what's next for you? Do you have anything exciting coming through the docket?
Well, I'm already involved in quite a few boards. I'm on on the gifts board, obviously, but I'm involved with Seed Master Manufacturing. That's a new opportunity for me, so I'm pretty excited about that. And I also do some work with CN, and I'm chair of the CN Agriculture Advisory Council. So, but and involved in the Canadian Agriculture and do a little bit of volunteer work, on the side with STARS, just as the Field of Stars Committee. So it seems like I've always got exciting things to do. My challenge is always, do I have enough time to do it all at the same time as farming? And hopefully spending a little bit more time with my family now that I'm not necessarily, working 24/7 the way it seems like I used to. So I just think, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what else is coming along. And I'm hoping I can get out and do a little bit of public speaking again on leadership and public trust when COVID is finally over. And we get to go back to having events where we get to see each other face to face. I'm pretty excited about that. This next year, I'll be happy to get to all the events I can once COVID allows us to get back together.
And Quick Clayton's got one more question. He says the environmental movement seems to have it in for modern ag. Do you have any ideas on how we should combat that? I'm sure he's asking when it comes to messaging and how to communicate with these audiences.
Right. And this is all, so tied to this issue of public trust. And I think it is that we, very authentically communicate what we do, why we do it, what are our values and our interests, and how that actually isn't all that different, in fact, from some of the consumers. So I think the environmental groups are a challenge that we need to understand. They're often coming up with a bit of an agenda. So it's how do we message to sort of make sure that we're communicating our approach to practices that we're using on our farms, but then making sure that the broader, sort of, I would say, less agenda minded consumer, so the environmental groups and others are going to always have an agenda, but what about the broad consumer who's just wondering, how do I make sure I have safe food for my families, to make sure that the message is focused on them? Because I'm not sure we'll ever be able to completely push back on the environmental agenda, but make sure that we're doing the right thing and communicating how we're doing the right thing. We do have some of the best regulations in the world, the safest food in the world. We need to be able to lean on that and communicate, to the consumers about that.
Completely. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add to our audience?
I think that's it. It's been great having a good viz with you, Kara. It's been awesome. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. I just love hosting you guys. It's always great to have your questions, and never feel like you can't ask us questions. That is why we are here. We are here so you guys can be with us live, and it's just a wonderful experience. So thank you very much. And tomorrow I will be your host again on RealAg Live, 1 p.m. Mountain or 3 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to tune in on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook. We will be here. And in the meantime, make sure you listen to Real Ag Radio at 2:30 p.m. Mountain on Rural Radio 147 on Sirius XM. Thanks everyone for getting real and getting connected.